It's been a long time since Sir Ridley Scott has received so much negative feedback on his work. Critics scold the loose script and unclear storyline. Viewers are frightened by the long and meaningless dialogue. The French don't like that their story is retold by a Brit. The Russians are dissatisfied with the crumpled episode of Napoleon's march to Moscow. All in all, Scott has succeeded in angering film buffs around the world. But today, we will answer those questions that after viewing are interested in the viewer most of all. Napoleon's troops shot up the pyramids? Of course they didn't. One can only sympathize with the Egyptologist historians who saw Ridley Scott's film. A couple of scenes could have caused them real distress. Of course, there is no documentary evidence that French artillerymen fired on the pyramids. Moreover, the cannons available in France at the time could not have fired in the way shown in the film. And in general, although the Battle of Napoleon's troops with the Turks and Egyptians and bears the proud name "At the Pyramids," in fact, the battle took place at a distance of 15 kilometers from the pyramids of Giza, and the cannons of that time could not shoot more than 2,600 meters. By the way, it is worth debunking another myth. It is believed that it was the French during their Egyptian campaign damaged the Sphinx statue by hitting its nose with a cannon shot. This is incorrect for a number of reasons. Firstly, the damage to the sculpture had been documented and sketched long before the French campaign. Secondly, Napoleon's expedition was not punitive or military in nature. Bonaparte claimed to be bringing civilization to the barbarians, and so the troops were not supposed to destroy anything. On the contrary, in Paris it was considered the first scientific study of Egypt and its ancient artifacts. Is it true that at Austerlitz the battle was fought on the ice of a lake? There's a mistake here too. The Battle of Austerlitz is considered the pinnacle of Napoleon's tactical and strategic talent, and he did indeed brilliantly defeat the Russian and Austrian armies, outnumbering the French. But it was not exactly as Scott describes it. Not only the course of the battle was different, the director somewhat exaggerated the importance of water obstacles on the way of the fighting armies. In the film, we see a huge lake, cracked ice, which swallowed dozens and hundreds of Austrian and Russian soldiers. But in fact, the battlefield was dotted with several small ponds, in which it was difficult to drown. By the way, after the battle was over, Napoleon ordered the ponds to be drained and the fallen soldiers to be taken out of them. They turned out to be no more than a dozen. Napoleon marched with his troops in a cavalry charge? Although Ridley Scott showed us Napoleon bravely rushing to the attack on a warhorse, in reality this never happened. Commanders at all times were at a decent distance from the main battle. Much more realistic are the scenes in which Bonaparte watches the battle from an elevated position in the distance. Commanders of his level managed armies and regiments, using strategic decisions and unexpected tactical moves against the enemy, which are better seen from the outside. A cavalry attack was not only risky for life, but also made no sense. In the heat of battle, the commander's personal example could be seen by only a few dozen soldiers out of many thousands involved in the battle. In addition to the question of cavalry attacks, should know that Napoleon in principle was a very bad rider. Unlike other children of aristocrats, he grew up in a home where riding was given very little time. During his military training, Bonaparte learnt the basic knowledge of how to handle a horse. But even here, it should be taken into account that he mostly saddled small breeds of horses, like Arabian and Berberian, so he felt uncomfortable on thoroughbreds and could not climb on them without help. Did Napoleon really insult the British ambassador? There is an interesting scene in Ridley Scott's film in which Napoleon, furious at the attitude of the English court towards his proposals, summons the British ambassador and throws the phrase,
"You think you're so great because you have boats!"
The presence in the minutes of the meetings of politicians and diplomats of the time was refuted by Michael Breuer's himself, Ridley Scott's historical consultant. He pointed out that the line was invented to enhance the dramatic effect, but in reality, Napoleon was not too far from such a statement. The French ruler was really furious at the cold indifference of the British and almost gave away his plans to move his army of 200,000 troops on Britain. Was Napoleon really came from nothing and conquered everything, as the film's tagline says? It is a beautiful metaphor, but alas, it is too far removed from life. To begin with, Napoleon Bonaparte was not a commoner, a clueless peasant, or a soldier from among the ruined townspeople. His father, Carlo Bonaparte, was a very famous Corsican aristocrat, and Napoleon grew up on the island of Corsica in the luxurious palace of his ancestors, natives of the Tuscan nobility. In Paris, young Napoleon also appeared for a reason. His father served as a representative of Corsica at the court of King Louis XVII. The same can be said about the second part of the film's advertising slogan. Napoleon did manage to seriously change the political landscape of continental Europe, but the blow to France's main enemy, England, was never struck. The closest France came to a direct invasion was in 1802, when a substantial military force had already assembled on the Channel coast. However, Napoleon's campaigns in Egypt and Austria did not allow to create a preponderance of forces, and the offensive was postponed. Later, the Peace of Amiens was concluded, and the two eternal enemies buried the hatchet. Napoleon won convincing victories in 53 battles out of 60, the most painful defeats the commander suffered in the Pyrenees Wars and in the famous Battle of Waterloo. Does the screen screen image of Josephine correspond to Napoleon's real-life wife? Josephine was indeed much more socially sophisticated and sexually experienced than Napoleon. The explanation for this is very simple. She was 6 years older than her lover. It is mentioned in the film in passing, but before her marriage to Napoleon, Josephine had already been married. Her husband, Alexander Beaugarn, was beheaded in 1794, leaving her widowed with 2 young children. She was indeed found guilty of adultery, and the misdemeanor made the pages of the newspapers. Napoleon annulled his marriage to Josephine in 1810 after vain attempts to conceive an heir. The same year, he married Marie Louise of Austria, who immediately bore him a son. The film also takes some liberties with Josephine's appearance. In addition to a noticeable difference in age, contemporaries noted another important detail of the appearance of Napoleon's wife. The woman almost did not smile. This is due to the fact that in the years of his first marriage, Josephine spent a lot of time in the Caribbean, where addicted to chewing sugarcane leaves. This addiction almost completely destroyed her teeth, so in public, the First Lady of France preferred to keep her mouth shut. Is Joaquin Phoenix's age the same age as Napoleon? Ridley Scott has aged his title character considerably. At the time of shooting the film in 2022, Joaquin Phoenix was 47 years old, and this is a decade more than the age of the real Napoleon. Just for information, Napoleon became a general in 20 years, married Josephine in 26, the military campaign in Egypt he led in 29, and in Russia went to 43. Bonaparte died in 1821 at the age of 51, being only 3 years older than today's Phoenix. Amusingly, the Russian Emperor Alexander I is shown in the film as a vain boy, but in reality, he was 2 years older than Napoleon. Did the film offend French audiences? It would be more correct to say that Ridley Scott's film was not taken seriously in France. Even at the stage of the first trailer, the French noted that the way Napoleon, played by Joaquin Phoenix, spoke in English and with an American accent looked unusually silly. After the film's release, a number of Parisian publications called it boring, immeasurably stupid, irritating, pro-British, and anti-French. Napoleon, in their opinion in the film, looks like a sentimental cad. We should probably expect the announcement soon of a new big French film about Bonaparte, which would show Napoleon as the true French see him. Thanks for watching. Why do so many people watch me without subscribing? Click the red button and give me a like. I'd be very happy if you did. Also, check out the previous video about how Henry Ford wanted to build his utopia in Brazil.